Hello, everybody. Familiar faces here. That's wonderful. I'm probably just going to wait for about 5 minutes. Let everyone kind of trickle in. Oops, if I can reorganize my screen so I can see everything. There we go. How's everyone's week going? Wonderful. That's great. So what you'll see on the screen right now is just an idea of some of the supplies that maybe you will want to grab. The list is on the website if you want to. It's easier to read something than to look at a picture. But I've got my water in a cup. I've got some ceramic bowls where I can mix up some paints in different colors. I have watercolor greeting cards and some craft paper greeting cards, and then but I'm going to be starting work on just regular cardstock. You can also do printer paper. It might get a little bit wet if it's printer paper, but that's certainly an option that you can do. So. Oh, and of course I've also got a rag because we're artists and we make messes, and sometimes we need to have things like paper towels or rags to clean things up. So, Alexandra, hi.
Colors.
Say it one more time.
What colors?
What colors? I am using a Prussian blue, so it's a dark, almost a navy blue. And I have some white watercolor paints and some green watercolor paints. So this is kind of what the blue one looks like. This is what the blue and the green together. I forgot about the red. And this is what the white looks like on the craft paper. All right. All right. Is the music better, guys? I turned it down. Is that easier to hear me? I'm sorry about that. All right. Wait, one more minute. Jonah, go ahead.
Is it okay if I use the watercolor I did in your class?
Absolutely.
The watercolor paper?
Yes, of course. So I forgot, guys, you also need something round. I'm just going to use the lid of a little container that I have here. I could also use one of these bowls, but it's just easier to draw a circle if you can trace something. So if you have like a, oops, excuse me, a thing of tape, you can use that. Just anything round would be ideal to have on hand to help you out. Okay. Sorry, say that one more time. I didn't hear.
Do you want us to have two sizes?
No, just one will do. As long as it fits on your card, that will be great. All right. Natalie. Do you have a question, Natalie? Uh-oh. You have to unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. Sorry, you're still muted.
Do you guys have a question?
No? Okay. I saw a
No, we
hand
don't.
raised, and so I just wanted to make sure that
That's
we
the hand
answered
raise,
questions. Sometimes what happens with Zoom is it has these automatic things that will raise a little emoji hand when you keep your hand up. I have it turned off on my computer because it always recognizes like my thumbs up, like when I'm doing something on the camera, and we have like confetti or balloons, and it's very distracting. So I've turned it off, but there's a little icon at the top of your computer screen. Sometimes I don't know how it works on a Windows, but there's a little icon, a camera icon on my computer that you click it, you say turn off automatic hand recognition or something like that, and it'll make it so that if you do something with your hands that Zoom thinks is a hand raise, then it won't tell me that you're raising your hand. So okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to show you some different wreaths, some different ideas for wreaths. I'm going to start with showing you the different brush marks that we're going to use to make all of these different wreaths. You'll notice that there's really only two brush marks, two shapes that I'm going to use, kind of this roundish teardrop shape, and then this longer leaf shape. So if you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand or click the little hand raise icon, because while I'm painting, I can't keep an eye on all of your lovely faces, but Zoom will give me like a bell. It will ding in my ear, and I'll know to look up and see who has a question. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So here we go. I'm going to move all this out of my way for right now. So I'm starting with my cardstock. And what you're going to do is, if you already have your paint squeezed out, then that's great. You can just start mixing. But if you have two paints like I have here, you're just going to squeeze these out of the way. I don't need that many. You're just going to squeeze a little bit of whatever color you want to start out with, about a half of a pea size, into whatever it is you can mix in. And then add a bunch of water. Monica, do you have a question? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I don't have the cards, like
Do you have any kind of a watercolor paper?
I have this.
That's fine. You can use that. You'll just have to be careful. Use a little bit thicker watercolor paints, not very watery watercolor paint, and it will work fine. All right, so you can see I've added about 5 drops of water to my paints, and I'm mixing it in. And I have kind of a half and half thick kind of a watercolor paint. It's not very watery. It's a kind of a milky consistency. Okay. All right. Move that out of the way. Make sure that my rag is in place. So if I have any accidents, I'm ready to go. I'm going to move my camera down just a little bit so that you can see what I'm doing. Okay. So this is my round brush. I'm using a number 6. And I'm going to dip it in the paint, make sure that my paint is mixed in with the water because I don't want any clumpy paint. And we're just going to practice, first of all, the different marks that we can make to make the wreath, the different leaf shapes. So I'm going to hold my brush with the handle pointing towards the ceiling, okay? I'm going to angle mine a little bit so that you can see what my brush is doing. But I'm going to paint kind of away from myself. That lets me see the pressure that my brush, how hard I'm pushing my brush on my paper. So just practice, do 3 or 4 of these brush marks. Put the tip of your brush down. Think about stamping your paper, but don't stamp it hard like you're smashing the paper. Just gently push your brush down and lift up, and you should get kind of an upside down teardrop shape. See how that goes for you. Let's see, do a couple more. It's always good to warm up. Now, if you end up having kind of like alien fingerprints, kind of like that, that means you're pushing too hard. Maybe push a little bit gentler. One thing I want you to remember as we're painting is we're not in a rush. We're not in a hurry. Good art never happens when we're in a rush. Or at least art that we like. I've never made something when I was in a hurry that I liked. Now, if you feel like you've got kind of those upside down teardrop shapes handled, maybe try some of the leaf shapes, the pointed leaf shapes. For that one, we start with the tip of our brush on the paper and we draw a straight line. But as we get to the middle of our line, we press down a little bit more. And when we get to the end of our line, we lift up. So press down, lift up. Press down, lift up. You can curve them. Just have fun with it. Catherine.
So when I press down my paintbrush and like pull it back up, my paintbrush doesn't spring back up into its original place. It stays squished in the position when it was pushed down.
Okay, so that sounds like you don't have enough paint on your brush. Is your paint very thick? Okay, add 1 or 2 drops of water and see if that doesn't soften it up. Sometimes if our brush, let's see if I can make it happen with my brush. Squeeze it out. So if I have my brush is kind of dry or the paint isn't very wet, what happens is I push down and lift up and I get this kind of scratchy mark on my page, which is great for texture, but it's not so great for leaf shapes and wreaths. So maybe add a little bit more water to your paint if it's very sticky. We don't want honey paint. We want kind of that half and half milky kind of consistency with our paint. How's everybody doing? Feel like you're getting the hang of it? Okay. Well, I've got some room on this paper and I'm a big fan of practicing before I start my final, right? Because there's usually something that I'm going to do when I practice that I think, oh, I didn't think about that. I need to plan for that. So I'm going to practice first. And one thing that you might be thinking, maybe, as we go into this is how do we make sure that the wreath, that everything's nice and even? The key to that is going to be turning our paper. So I'm going to move my paint out of the way just a little bit and make sure that I don't have anything that I'm going to knock over on my table. And I'm going to put, now we can do standing up leaves. I'm going to do these stamps first. I can make my leaf stand up, but what I think I like better on a wreath is when they're a little bit sideways. So I'm going to put the tip of my brush on this circle that I've drawn. I'll let you guys draw a circle if you haven't already. Whoever is moderating and letting people in, thank you very much.
No worries. I won't be here.
Oh, Sarah, thank you.
But I'm here for now.
I just saw
can
the
do it while
co-host
I'm
as soon
here.
as I said that.
I love that Lydia
All
has
right.
some coffee there.
All right. How's everyone doing? Do we kind of have a circle? You got it? Awesome. Okay. So I'm going to start at the top, and I'm going to hold my brush a little bit at an angle, put the tip, the sharp part of my brush on the circle, and very slowly and carefully press down. If my mark isn't exactly what I want, I can always try again and try and fix that very, very slowly and carefully. So I've got one leaf now at the very top of my circle. Helena, is that you? Are you on somebody else's Zoom? Okay.
Yeah.
I read Monica and I was like, that's not Monica, that's Helena.
Yeah. I keep joining the wrong one, and it's like only letting me join this one.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And you clicked on
Well, like
the
for
other...
a second. Well, the other ones like put me in for a second, and then it left.
Huh. That's interesting. I don't know why that's happening. Mrs. Marshall, can you help us with that? I don't know if I have an answer.
I'm going to jump out and try the other rooms to see how they're working.
Okay.
Monica, which room
I
will
want
you
to just
get in?
Helena, which room were you trying to get into?
Oh, I'm sorry.
The one, the I forgot what it's called. No, the other one.
The nativity?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll give it a try.
Thank you. Okay, once we have one leaf at the top, I'm going to turn my page. This is kind of the key to making your wreath look really nice and professional. I'm turning my page 90 degrees. That means I put my hand at the top of my paper and I turn it so that the top of my paper is now on my left side. And I'm going to do another leaf shape right at the top of my circle, or what's now the top of my circle. And then I'm going to turn my paper again. And do another one. And another one. So now I have 4. Is it Nora?
It's pronounced Murray. And
Murray.
Are we supposed to be using is it a certain type of watercolor? Because mine is different and it's like acting all like it's not showing the actual color.
It's not. So when you put water on it, does it not become like a soft paint or a liquid paint?
It's like it does become a liquid paint, but it's like, how do I explain it? It's all 2 1/4. It's all like, I don't really know how to explain it, but it's like extra wet and doesn't show like a dark color. Even though I try to
so it's a very
darken
light
it's like,
paint.
yeah.
Okay, so that just means that you don't have enough paint in your water. So when you mix your color, add more paint to it and don't put more water into it. Does that make sense? All right.
So which student is the one that would like to join Ms. Jacobson's room?
That was Helena. Helen, are you still here? I think she's left.
Okay. Miss Jacobson's room seems to be working.
Okay.
But she wasn't sure. She'd let some students in, but she didn't see them come through. So maybe she should just try again. So maybe that's what she's doing.
Okay. Is it Alina? Is that how you say your name?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Is this still the practice sheet?
Yes. Yes, this is still the practice. So from here, it's what you can kind of tell is since we've got these 4 leaves on there, it's easier to see where the middle of each of these sections is. And I can go now and keep turning my paper and putting leaves in between those 4 leaves that I had before. And do you see how the leaves are very evenly spaced out? Okay. That's kind of what you're wanting. Now, I could do the whole outside and then do the inside, but I like doing some of the outside and then some of the inside and then the rest of the outside and then the rest of the inside. So, because sometimes I like to change things up and decide how I want the wreath to look each time when I'm working on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my wreath in front of me. And this time, instead of starting at the top of my circle, I'm going to start on the bottom of my circle, but on the inside. Okay. I can make my inside leaves go the opposite way, or I can make them go in the same direction as the outside leaves. It's up to you. I like mine to go in the same direction as the other side. So I'm tilting my brush to my left, putting my leaf right in between the ones that I have already painted. I'm going to turn my paper and put a leaf in between each of the leaves I have painted so far. Oops. And watch your hand because you might get some smudges. You might get paint on your hands and then smudge your circle. But we can turn that into something else. It's not a big deal. Sometimes that extra little bit of handmade watercolor card is what just kind of sets it up into the awesome arena. So. Is that a leftover hand, Alina, or do you have another question? Sorry. All right. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some green paint now because I want to practice one of these other leaf shapes in my wreath and see what I like. Oops, if I can get the top off the screen. I haven't used this green in a long time. Oh, maybe we won't use that green. It's okay. I have lots and lots of watercolor paint. Pea-sized drop of paint. About 5 drops of water. About 5. Give me a little bit more or less. All right, this green is very sticky. So I might, let's see. I'm gonna test it out first. No, I think that's good. I thought it was more sticky than it was. Okay. And if you have a different size brush, now if you want to, you can try out maybe a smaller brush. That's what I'm gonna do. And I'm going to take a minute to decide where I want my next leaves to go and what kind of leaves they're going to be. So I'm going to put one of these leaf-shaped brush marks on the opposite side of each of the leaves that I've painted so far. So again, this might twist your brain around a little bit. So I'm going to go slow, and I'm going to make sure I keep turning my paper so that I don't paint something that I in a place where I don't want it to be. So I'm going to start here at the top, tip of the brush on the opposite side of this blue leaf. I'm going to press down, lift up, and I'm going to do one of those next to every single blue leaf. Now, it might look like I'm going fast. I don't mean to look like I'm in a hurry. I've just been painting for a really long time. And so I've painted these things lots and lots of times. You might have to go a little bit slower. Don't judge how fast you should be going by how fast I'm going. If you think I'm going fast at all, I might be going really slow to you. You guys might be expert watercolor painters. I don't know. Oops, make sure that my brush is nice and pointy. Now I'm going to start on the inside. Okay, I kind of like that. So I think that's a pretty good practice. I practiced 2 types of leaves. I practiced turning my paper. I found some things that I like. Maybe you found some things that you didn't like, some things that you want to change, which is great. But I think I'm ready to do a final one. What do you guys think? Yes? Okay. All right. Catherine.
What do you think is going on if like you're getting like blobs of paint at the tip of your mark and then the rest of the mark is kind of pale? Is that like too much water or something?
It's probably the paper that you're using. Is it like a cardstock or is it a watercolor paper?
I'm on Bristol board right now.
Yeah. Okay. So it could be 2 things. It could be that you have a clump of paint in that area of your brush that isn't mixed in with the water and it's leaving that clump on the paper. But it also might be that your brush is overloaded, and so whenever your brush kind of hits that spot, it's dumping the paint in that place. All you have to do is you might have to slow down and just kind of have 2 brushes, like one to paint with and then a dry one or a damp one, a clean one, sorry, a dry clean one that you kind of suck up that little bead of paint if it's bothering you. Obviously, I'm using cardstock right here, and that always happens right in the middle of my brush mark. It dumps the paint in that middle section. Sometimes I care about that, sometimes I don't. But it's just it's a nature of watercolor. It's going to do that. You can play with it and get it to not do that, but it takes some patience. So sorry, I don't have a better answer for you. All right. So I think I'm going to do one of my watercolor cards. And I'd like to do something like this. So with one color, I can actually get a really cool detailed card. All I have to do is I have to have some thick paint like I have here. And then I have to take some of that paint from, whoops, added some water to that. I didn't mean to do that. I'm going to take some of that paint and put it in a new section of my palette or in a new bowl as I have here. And I'm going to add some more water to it. So essentially what I have now is a light version of my color and a dark version of my color. And we can test it on a piece of test paper and see that this color is very light, this color is very dark. I'm actually going to add a little bit more water to it to make it really, really light because I like that look. Yeah, just like that. Put my brush down, move some of these papers out of the way. Put my example up there so you guys can see it. I'm going to grab a watercolor card. Something to think about if you have some cards that are already made, make sure that you pay attention to where the opening of your card is, because if you start painting and you're painting, I mean, we're painting wreaths, so they're circles, and they look the same no matter which way you turn your paper. But if you want your circle, your wreath to be kind of at the top of your card, and you don't pay attention and you have your wreath down at the bottom of your card because you didn't realize that your opening was on the wrong side, you'll be disappointed. So make sure you know where the opening of your card is when you start painting. So, all right, I'm gonna take my piece of tape, make sure that my wreath is kind of in the center. Actually, I'm going to put it up at the top so that you guys can see it a little bit better. Abigail.
Do you think oh, can't see this. Do you think this is too big for the card?
I don't think it's too big. I think that you'll have to be careful with the edges and make smaller leaves on the outside maybe. And keep your bigger leaves to maybe the inside and the top and the bottom. But I think that'll be fine.
Okay, thank you. Oops.
All right. Tracing my circle. When we're working with watercolor, you want to work with your lightest paint first and then put your darker paint on second. So I'm going to do my four leaves, top, bottom, and side to side. I'm going to do those first to make sure that I have a nice, even order of my petals. So top, very light blue. I like that a lot. I can spread that drop of water out if it bothers me. Turn my paper. Well, I'm going to turn it 90 degrees first. Now, watercolor paper behaves a little bit differently than cardstock does. It's going to stay wet a little bit longer, and you might have to go a little bit slower to make sure that the paint kind of goes where you want it to go. But again, we're not in a hurry. We're going to take our time. It's not a race. All those good things. All right. Now with this one, I've used a couple of different sizes of brush. I started with my bigger brush with my lighter paint. And then I did some smaller petals with a smaller brush, smaller petals. I keep calling them petals. I don't know why. Smaller leaves with a smaller brush. and you can experiment and see what you think looks the best. Turning my paper, making sure that my leaves are even, watching the placement of my hand, because I don't want to put my hand on my nice card. I've done a row on the outside, and now I think I'm going to do one on the inside. I'm going to do some big ones on the inside, I think. Maybe I'll do a big one, then a little one, or a smaller one. And then a big one. And then a small one. And then a big one. Oh, that one was really big. That's okay. And a small one. And a big one and a small one. Wave it up and down, make sure it isn't too wet. If I end up having any kind of puddles on my paper, don't wiggle your card around when you have puddles on your paper, otherwise you'll get drips. What you can do is you can take a dry brush, stick the tip of it in the puddle, and it will soak up some of that water like a sponge. Don't wave your brush around, just stick it in the puddle, let it soak up some of that paint, dry your brush off, and soak up some more paint, and that way you won't have a puddle and your painting will dry a little bit faster. Because when there's more water on your painting, it takes longer to dry. All right, I think I'm done with my light color, so I'm going to add a little bit more paint to it to make it slightly darker. And I'm going to add some more leaves. I'm going to do one on each side of the leaves that I already have. We'll make them different sizes. Oops. If my leaf becomes a shape that I don't really like, I can always fix it. Kind of carefully trace over where I want it to go. Easy peasy. Oops. Just like that.
Wow, Ms. Silkwood, that's starting to look really pretty.
Thank you. Thank you so much. These are really fun and relaxing things for me to do. And when I give them to people, they really like them. And I like giving people things that they enjoy. So, you know, giving people a handmade card is always really special. All right, so I could stop here, and that makes a really nice Christmas card, but I'm going to keep going because I like lots and lots of layers on my painting. I shouldn't have rinsed my brush. I don't want to add water to this dark paint. Adding a little bit more of my watercolor to my dark paint just to make sure, because I dumped some water in there earlier accidentally, so I don't want it to be super light. I want it to be nice and thick and dark. So at this point, I can add leaves in between other leaves. And if I put my brush down on any of these wet leaves, the paint will bleed together. Sometimes that looks really cool. I'm going to do that on purpose so that you guys can see what it looks like, hopefully. But you can see how the paint starts to blend together right there where that dark paint touched that slightly lighter paint. Let's see if I can do it again. Sometimes that's fun and interesting. I'm going to put a dark leaf between each of the leaves that I've painted so far. Sometimes I paint these and I have like a plan. I was like, I'm going to do this pattern and I'm going to do it this way. And it's going to look like this. But sometimes I like to just plan it as I go. That's fun sometimes. All right, I'm going to take a moment, look at my painting, ask myself, what do I like? What do I not like? Does it need anything different? I'm going to go back in with my lighter color. And I think I'm going to add some small leaves in there. Maybe I'll let them touch the darker colors and bleed together. Turning my paper, making sure I'm not dragging my hand into my painting. So I'm working really hard at this right now, and it would be a shame to have a smudge that I didn't plan for. But we're not worried about smudges because we can always turn them into other things. So now what's nice at this point is because I have so many leaves on my wreath, and I'm starting to use some darker paint, I can overlap these lighter colors and it will make it look really 3D. So let's see. Where do I want to go with my paint next? Now I'm just going to start kind of filling in some gaps. You know, I'm not perfect, obviously, and I don't always make all of my painting super even. And that's fine. Because I can add things in. Oops, make that a little bit more round there at the tip. This is kind of the fun part for me when you know, you've got most of the painting kind of done and you're just going in and adding leaves wherever you think they need to be to kind of finish out your leaf, your wreath shape. I'm going to overlap some on the inside. Almost drag my hand through the paint. Okay. I'm gonna switch brush sizes, I think. Use a smaller brush now. Whenever I'm designing something, I like to think about having variety. So I have big things, I have small things, I have light things, I have dark things. Even if I'm painting in just one color, having all of those different pieces will make your painting, whatever it is, whether you're painting an illustration or a nativity scene or whatever, it will make your painting look more interesting to have lots of different things, different sizes in your painting. All right, how are y'all doing? Questions? Sorry, I keep hitting the camera. I have kind of a puddle forming. My brush had too much paint on it, so I'm going to put my dry brush in there, soak up some of that paint so it doesn't make a puddle on my page. Okay. Now this is starting to look, I think I'm okay with that. Light blues, medium blues, dark blues. You can also, with your tiny brush, your smallest brush, paint some thin lines on some of these leaves for like that central vein. Don't have to do it on everyone. You don't have to do it at all. I think it looks nice sometimes. And again, it adds that variety. Thin lines, thick lines, curved, straight. I'm not going to do it to every single leaf, but some of them I will. So there is one version of a card. I'm gonna set that aside and let it dry. What you can do is you can write things in the middle, obviously. You can write things at the bottom, you can write things on the inside. You don't have to leave it as just a leaf. You can put someone's name in the middle. There's lots and lots of places that you could go with these kind of ideas. So, all right, I'm gonna do another one. Abigail.
Do you erase the pencil after the... Okay, thank you.
Yes, I do. Yes. After it's dry, though. I usually, since I'm painting these at night, I'd probably leave them overnight to dry just to be on the safe side. I mean, watercolor dries relatively quickly, but, we're not in a hurry. Just leave it, let it dry, and then erase it another time. So. Okay. All right. I'm going to do multiple colors on this one. Something more on the lines of this kind of a wreath. Let's try and organize my space a little bit. My rag handy. Okay. Make sure that my paint is mixed up. Sometimes the green, or my green, this particular green, it likes to become kind of grainy and separate from the water. I'm just going to make sure it's nice and mixed up. Okay, starting at the top. Make some leaf shapes for this one. Start with that thin to thick to thin. Do some different ones in between. Start on my inside leaves. Alina, go ahead.
Do you have any tips to make sure that your leaves are going in a the correct angle?
That is a good question. So when I'm painting, I'm actually not moving my hand very much at all. I'm moving the paper. And so what happens when I do that is because I'm painting in a circle, the majority of my leaves end up being at the same angle because it's my paper moving, not my hand. So But if I'm moving my hand all around, then I'm going to get different angles of leaves, which is nice. Wreaths are very natural things, and leaves go all over the place. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think that looks really nice. My first leaves will probably be pretty even, and they'll all be going kind of at the same angle around the circle. But as you can see from some of these other ones, the later ones, they're kind of a little bit more chaotic. So, which I like. But what I would do is I would practice holding my brush. I like to hold my brush on the handle, not on the metal part. This is called the ferrule. Something that I tell my students a lot is brushes are not pencils. We don't use them like pencils. They are much more, we can use them in lots of different ways. And if we hold them like pencils, then we start to use them like pencils. And when we use pencils, we're only using our fingers to move our brushes. But when we hold them, when we think about them as brushes, we hold them on the widest part of the handle. We hold our hands above our paper when we're painting, and we can paint with our wrist, we can paint with our elbow, and our shoulder, which gives us, we can actually make lots more marks on our painting than if we're just using our fingers. So if I'm just using my fingers, do you see how far I can move my brush? It's not very far. The movements I can make are very small. But if I use my wrist, my movements get really big. And if I use my elbow, I can make even bigger movements. And that's sometimes what we want in painting, is we want to be able to make the most interesting marks that we can, whenever we want to make them. So, Abigail.
So I was doing this, and then I realized I put a green, and there's a green here, but then there's a blue here. So I'm not really sure what color to put there now.
Were you wanting it to be very even, or were you wanting it to be, what were you wanting it to be?
I was hoping for it to be more even, maybe.
Okay. So are you saying that is it just out of order, or can
It's
you
out.
get your darker color and paint over one of your leaves?
So it's in order. So there's a green here, and then there's a blue here, but then there's a green in the middle of it. But if I put a blue there, it would be the same problem.
I gotcha. Well, so sorry, I need to problem solve this visually. So you have a green and a blue.
Yes.
Right?
And
Okay,
in
and
the
you
middle.
have a green. Go ahead.
So there's a green, and then there's a blue.
Okay, so it's a kind of like this.
Yes.
You have a green, and a blue. Okay.
Right.
And are they different shapes, or are they the same leaf shape?
They're the same leaf shape.
Okay. Well, is one of them darker than the other?
My blue is a little bit darker than the green.
Okay. Well, the nice thing about watercolor is, because it has that transparency, I can paint something. Well, let me do it down here. I can paint over something that I don't particularly like the color of with a new color. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If the color that you're painting over is light, obviously it works. What I would do is, it might not turn out the way that you were originally thinking in your head, but what you could do is change up the pattern. So instead of having blue, green, maybe you have blue, green, blue, green, blue, green, blue, green, blue. That would be an idea. Well, let me ask you, what other ideas? So that's one idea. Could you think of another idea that would maybe it's not going to be your original, but you could incorporate something that would incorporate that quote unquote mistake and turn it into something else.
Maybe I could put a darker blue over it so that I can have blue, dark blue, green, maybe.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, art is all about problem solving, guys. I can't tell you how many times I've sat down and been like, I am going to make this beautiful thing and this is what it's going to be. And then, God is always showing me in art, art is just like life. We make plans and then things happen, and you have to learn to submit to something that's not your original idea. Sometimes that's hard, but it's a good thing to learn. So, Joylyn, I saw your hand. Did you have a question?
Well, I just noticed that a few were dropping off and signing off, but I also heard they were thanking you for this beautiful thing, because I just wanted to say I love this so much because your analogy is so perfect, that there's a design that we have in mind, and then sometimes it gets reinvented, but a lot of times that can even turn out better than what we thought to begin with. So, and I love this. I can't wait to see how you guys are doing. I would ask you to hold them up, but it looks like you all are all still in the midst of painting, and I don't want any paint to run. So maybe Miss Silkwood, when they get toward the end and they've blown on it a little bit or gotten a blow dryer after it, you can get them to hold it up and take a screenshot or something.
Catherine, that looks beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that. And Catherine reminded me, guys, I tend to make smaller leaves, but you can make big leaves. There's nothing that says that you can't make all different kinds of sizes. I've shown you maybe 2 or 3 ways to make a wreath, but you can use these things to do an infinite number of different ideas. So don't feel like you just have to do what I do. Where we learn things and we copy, just like when we're learning how to play the piano, we play songs that other people have played, and we practice and we practice and we practice. But then sometimes we have an idea and we write our own songs. We still use the same notes, but we can write a new song using the same tools that we started out with. So it's the same thing with art. Is it Nore? I'm going to say your name wrong again. I'm so sorry, sweetie. That looks beautiful. Did you do multiple levels in your wreath? Like circles inside of circles inside of circles? Is that what I was seeing? Hold it up one more time. Oh, that looks really cool. Love that. Katie, oh, that's beautiful. I love how your wreath is kind of crossing over outside of your card. That's lovely. Is it Zoe? Am I saying it right? Yes? Awesome. That looks beautiful. I love the colors that you used. Is that your dad with you? Oh, very nice, Zoe's dad. Lovely. Alex. Very nice.
Thank you.
These are wonderful. Allison, is that your painting or your daughter's?
It's my daughter's. This is Annalise.
Annalise, that's beautiful. That's wonderful. Amaya and Ellie. Oh, I love those colors. I like how you've grouped them together and made that pattern. Very nice. That's lovely. Catherine, is your mom painting with us too? Let me know if you guys have any more questions. Alina, go ahead.
How are you like putting your hand on the table so your like fist doesn't hit the paper?
All right, guys, if you get seasick or car sick, don't look at the screen. I'm gonna move my camera a little bit. All right, let's see. So see if I can show you. So I rest the edge of my pinky on the paper, and I'm holding my brush kind of straight up in the air. Hopefully you can see that. Let's see if I can zoom out. So that's kind of how I do it. Let's see if I can. Sometimes when people ask me that question, I'm like, oh, how do I actually hold my brush and keep my hand out of my painting? So let's see. Yeah. So it's a lot of practice. And you know, this is 20 years of painting, so I've trained myself to hold my brush that way, and just support my hand with my pinky or the side of my pinky on my paper. It's also drawing on an easel teaches you how to do that too, because you can't draw on an easel and kind of put your hand on a vertical surface, so you have to learn how to just use your hand without resting it on something. So Abigail.
I wanted to know how you think I finished adding, oopsie. I finished adding my blue and then I added like a lighter green. How would I make this more interesting?
I think so. You have some leaves, and they're all. Well, I mean, as far as I can see over an internet connection. I think what I would do is you kind of have this V shape going very consistently around the outside. What if you added some leaves that are more parallel or laying down kind of against the circle of your wreath, and let some of them do it in a darker, like a more opaque paint, so a thicker paint, and let them overlap the leaves that you've drawn so far.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.